So yeah, we're going to be talking about our preparation for the race. And basically what we're going to be doing here is first we're going to take some questions, and then also I'm going to bring up the general platform we've been talking about at our leadership meetings for our race in 2026. So first question, will the independent great nation of California be a nation with a standing army? Militaries are expensive by their nature and increasingly unpopular to support or join. I come from a veteran family. I've always believed if I reform a government, I would not have a large standing army for the above reasons, but have a large National Guard or reserve who would be well suited to the real threat facing all nations of the 21st century, climate change. These guardsmen would be disaster response first and soldiers second, able to carry a hose in fire season with as much pride and experience as they would wield a rifle. Pending for your thoughts on such a proposal. That is a great question. And actually, that is one of our platform points. What we want to do is to make sure that we have what's called Cal Defense. What that would mean is that a major expansion of the State Guard. Now, this is the State Guard. This is not the National Guard. It can't be federalized. It can't be taken over by Trump or anyone in DC at this moment. The State Guard right now is about 900 people, all volunteers, very minuscule budget. So our proposal with Cal Defense is that we merge the State Guard with the Office of Emergency Services as well as CAL FIRE and expand it. Put a real defense budget behind it to actually make sure that would happen, that we could actually tackle all these, climate disasters, wildfires, what have you. That's their first job. Again, yes, defense of the nation state would be second, but really, again, climate change, wildfires. If we're spending so much money with the federal government right now, why are we actually hat in hand asking DC for help constantly? We should be able to take care of this ourselves, and we're going to have to, and people are going to have to pony up the money to make sure this happens. So that would be the first thing. I mean, we could have a very good military for not as much as what we're doing with the federal government right now. The federal government, I mean, we're talking, what is it, 850 billion, a trillion almost when it comes to defense. We could do that for much less. I mean, Switzerland, for example, neutral nation, peaceful nation, has a defense budget that they're rounding up to about 29 billion. So we could do the same and actually, again, be in the ballpark for actual real defense and really actually focus on the major catastrophes that we have to tackle, which is, again, wildfires, climate change, etc. So again, we could have that on the Swiss model, mostly volunteer, mostly as a National Guard, not for something to be deployed for whatever kind of, imperialist war overseas. I mean, we're not trying to knock over Iraq or Iran or anything like that. We could have a very good defense system that's mostly focusing about helping people, especially, again, if there's going to be flooding, fires, any kind of other, major league catastrophes. So that would be our thing. Cal Defense, that's very important for us. I mean, we have to have some expansion because, again, with FEMA being taken out and, thrown out the window, we need to actually make that happen. And actually, I'd like to turn over this to Ash. Ash is a volunteer fire captain in Lone Pine, and Ash, I think, can kind of speak about this a little bit further too.
Yeah, sure. So I work a lot of the big fires through Cal OES, through their system of mutual aid. So for those of you who don't know how the system works here in California, what ends up happening, especially this year on a lot of the federal fires, is Cal Fire gets involved, Cal OES gets involved. And what they do is when they run out of resources or they need to bring in more resources throughout the state, they'll contract small departments, regional departments, municipal departments, county, from wherever they can get them to get them up to the location to help fight the fire. So on the one hand, actually centralizing it, because right now what you have in California are so many fire agencies that it's a nightmare sometimes. They have learned how to work together, and what I'm talking about is the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, right? Those both have fire agencies, Park Service. Then you have, so at the federal level, that's what you have. Then you have CAL FIRE, which is a state agency, and then you have all the county fire agencies, all the municipal agencies, and all the small volunteer departments within rural counties. So having it centralized, not just for the budgeting aspect of it, which I can talk a little bit about too, but having some type of.
Oh, I'm sorry, if Evan, you're coming across. Hold on a second here. That will help out. Sorry about that, Evan, but Ash, continue.
It does make sense to centralize the process. Cal OES does an excellent job at managing state resources, and also that funding then reinforces small local departments, not just in like training on these bigger incidents, but also financially. So a lot of poor counties can't really afford their emergency services. Well, sending their guys out to do this and having the Cal OES system utilize them actually helps. So um, having said that, we do utilize currently National Guard resources on fire, and it's very invaluable help. So when you're talking about a united defense force like that, that personally, I think it's the future. The aircraft are becoming more and more involved in all aspects of fire operations, and those aircraft are very expensive, and it seems a waste for them to sit in a location all year and only be used, for fire operations. Even though those are expanding, it used to be 3 months, now it's 6 and sometimes January. Um, but uh, but it does make sense from that standpoint too, is to have multi-role uses for those type of resources for the state. So I mean, that was that. Now, one thing I did want to mention too, because you did mention international, most NATO countries actually have a smaller military than California has.
I mean, again, like, if we went by the standards of the US government right now, if you take our population and, divide it by the entire defense budget, I mean, we should be paying 90 billion. We don't need to do that. We can have it actually shrunk down and actually accomplish a lot of the goals that we want to do. So there's no reason why we have to be paying to the nose at like a level that's unheard of. I mean, 90 billion, I think, equals the war economy of Russia right now. We don't need to have that kind of budget. We can have it like Switzerland. I mean, one of our goals is to be basically the Switzerland on the Pacific, and we can match that. Okay, so next question. Off the back of Mandani's primary win in New York, I'm hopeful ranked choice voting and public sentiment is ready for change. I would love to see a CNP candidate that stands up for Californians against blatant attacks from the federal government. I'm especially curious who CNP could run to capture public attention and leverage it to action. That's a very good question. The person that we're going to be choosing for the candidate for governor, it has to be someone who's not Newsom. Newsom right now is rhetoric, talk, good rhetoric, sometimes funny. I mean, for example, the press office said, Stephen Miller was a fascist cuck. I'm glad that the gloves are coming off. I'm glad that Newsom called Trump a son of a bitch, which he is. But it's talk. It's rhetoric. It is not actually coming through. There is no direct action. There's nothing to actually, expand the state guard to monitor ICE activities. There's no state of emergency. We have kidnapping gangs in our state. He's not declared a state of emergency. He was on a press conference and talking about CHP as if he was an outside observer, that CHP was helping out ICE operations, and he was acting like he's from the outside. He's in charge of CHP. He is, again, the main one. He didn't do anything. So again, whoever we pick for office has to be someone who's not going to just give us nice little talking points on their way to the White House. That person should not have any desire for the White House. That person should be having the desire to be the defender of the California community. And that's the kind of person we need to have. And that's, again, we can learn a lot from Mandani. Mandani, this is an interesting note. When he started his campaign for mayor of New York, he polled in October of last year at 0%. And I've heard that, again, his budget to start off with was in maybe the tens of thousands of even that. And now, again, he's on the road to actually taking over the mayorship of New York. And we need to have that kind of energy. We need to present those kind of solutions outside the box, outside the establishment. I mean, Mandani is, for what I believe, is an independent candidate. And I think we can replicate a lot of that. But we have to have a candidate to make sure that, yes, Newsom's going to have a lot of funny little points that we'll all bring up and say well, that was a great thing to say. But we need to have someone who actually looks like they might actually do something. And that's what the candidate for governor has to be, someone who actually will do something. And we have to put some oomph behind them. We can't have this whole, talking ourselves to death while, again, the boot heel comes down. We have to make sure that someone actually wants to stand up and do something right. So that is, part of what we have to kind of make sure is in action. Next question. I think running a candidate for governor is great. I would also be interested in running candidates for state rep, senator offices that might be easier to win. Agreed and disagreed. We need to have a governor candidate in order to showcase that the party exists and that we actually have this option. Once we have a governor's candidate come out and actually put themselves forward as the one who's going to be defending the California community, I think you're going to be able to attract state reps, people running for supervisor like Ash did, other people for, quote unquote, smaller office to come out of the woodwork and actually join the campaign. But we have to start with the governor's race in order to bring acknowledgement that, again, we exist and we are actually offering something different, tactics and strategy wise.
Can I add something to that, Sean?
Sure.
Visibility is one of our primary issues right now for the party. A lot of people agree with a lot of our policies. They agree with, well, our platform, at least. They agree with the platform. They agree with, I mean, if you're on socials, you see a lot of people calling for secession, calling for an independent state or at least some type of autonomy. A lot of people are angry, but not a lot of people know we exist. So to just add weight to what Sean was saying, that is definitely the case. But I do agree that a party should be a party of action, and a lot of that action and a lot of that change that we all really want does happen at the local level. So when we can get on school boards, when we can, run candidates for city council or mayor or county supervisor or even like a county water board, right? Any elected positions with CNP candidates, even for those smaller nonpartisan roles, that's where we can get our chops down. That's where we can show the people of California what we can actually do when we get in those positions, and that too will organically grow the party. So I think they're equally important. And while we're trying to raise awareness right now, we will definitely also be developing the types of resources we need to empower local candidates across the board.
Ash, again, that's a good way to put it. Next question. I'm very excited to see the CNP run a candidate for governor. My question is this: how does the CNP plan to break through the dominance that the Democratic Party has over California and place in the top two during next year's primary election? I'm concerned that a relatively niche third party won't be able to compete with the Democratic Party's massive war chest and list of recognizable names like Katie Porter and maybe Kamala Harris. Again, it kind of goes back to the Mamdani question. We have to be assertive in that we are the defenders of the California community. We're the ones that are actually going to step up. We have to utilize social media, and we also basically have to, all of us on leadership have to do a deep dive of what Mamdani actually did. Because again, I would consider him an independent candidate. He was a Democratic socialist. He was not part of the machine. He was, not Andrew Cuomo, again, who was the only recognizable name. He had no name recognition to begin with. Again, in October, he was at 0%. So we need to make sure how to replicate that strategy that's appropriate for our values and for California. And I think that's the way we actually kind of break through the noise. Because if he could do it for New York, I mean, New York is, again, the financial capital of America. It's, could be considered almost the cultural capital of America. If he could actually get through all that stack and noise and actually beat, yes, Cuomo did have his baggage, obviously, but I don't think anyone back in October of last year would make any bets on him. I mean, obviously they didn't. No one knew who his name was. It was at 0%. So we can replicate that strategy. We can look into that, do a deep dive. I think we can actually make something happen there, just like Mamdani. So I think that's our best option, is to, look what has worked over in New York, because even though there isn't 100% a straight line between us and New York, we have a lot of the same issues. We have the same kind of like, I would say to a certain extent, cultural values. I mean, again, the value of immigration, the value of, being, again, a progressive place. I think that a lot of that we can kind of just pull from the Mamdani campaign and replicate it in our own best way. The last question, which is kind of a little bit of a duplicate: does the party have any military and defense platform? Again, that goes back to Cal Defense. Cal Defense, we have to expand the State Guard. We have to actually make sure that the Office of Emergency Services and, again, CAL FIRE are combined into one basic, super defense agency and mostly focus it on, again, the issues of climate change, wildfires, etc. This is not supposed to be a defense force for, again, knocking over a third world country or anything like that. This is supposed to be one that actually helps out at home, and that's our defense policy. And also, again, I mentioned Switzerland before. We should be the Switzerland on the Pacific. We should be, again, a neutral nation for the most part, except when it comes to matters of great humanitarian interests. We should always maintain ourselves as basically out of the affairs of a lot of the world, except for trade, cultural interaction, and just, being a good faith neighbor.
On one thing I didn't mention before on that subject too is another thing that they currently do is they fly rescue missions in our national parks, especially those involving aircraft. So they are involved in search and rescue, and that's just another function. And then obviously the big one is what you saw down in Palisades with the National Guard, would be that this cow defense would also be on the ground, any type of disaster, whether it was an earthquake, wildfire, flooding, and they would be assisting not only with search operations, but also with humanitarian aid to those areas, getting people to shelters, providing supplies, all those types of things that make a military actually useful other than occupying foreign countries and building bases all over the world.
So I'm going to open up the floor here. If anyone has additional questions, I'll get into what we worked out as our platform for the candidate to run for governor. But again, I want to open up because, again, you might have had a question, you didn't have a chance to send it in. Again, now's your time. Just, raise your hand and we'll go from there. If anyone has any additional questions about who we are, what we're doing, what we believe in, strategy, etc. So I'll just open the floor and yeah, anyone can just fire away. Just you know how to do the raise hand function, or you just want to call out, just let me know.
I want to know, and it was kind of speaking to that question we had the second to last, is I think you should challenge Gavin Newsom to a debate. He loves doing that.
Very true. He likes to go on podcasts with wackos and get free guns, and so maybe he wants to actually talk to a real Californian instead of someone that's outside, or maybe talk to again a real Californian than person in South Carolina to prepare for his presidential bid. So yeah. I don't see any problem with that. I mean, would I be, a bit unnerved to see the Newsom in person? Probably, but I think that we all have valid points here. Debate becomes easier when you're talking from truth and honesty and actually have ideas instead of just trying to BS your way through. And again, Newsom basically does that. Republicans definitely do that. So yeah, why not? I don't see any problem with that. We'll see if he returns any emails. But again, I'm not a Democratic National Committee person. I'm not, from South Carolina, and also I still have enough brain cells not to be right wing. So I don't know. Maybe he wants to talk.
Yeah.
But anyone else have any kind of question before I go into the platform we've worked out?
I do have a question, and it's kind of a curveball. So during the last primary election, California voted to keep essentially indentured servitude for our felons as part of our policies.
Right.
What is the CNP policy as far as providing work training for these people and other ways that we can obviously we're not going to go against the vote, but how can we it's slavery, so how can we provide work opportunities for these people who are essentially forced into labor camps?
I think that what we have to do is that when it comes to this issue, again, I think the public was in a vengeful mood. I think that, again, that they want these people to suffer. And, again, if you've been a victim of crime, theft, assault, murder of a loved one, whatever, again, you're angry. You want these people to suffer. Prison is already a place of suffering, but I think that you have to strip away the moral argument, because you want these people, with a few exceptions, like, child molesters or murderers, or again, like, sex offenders, but other people, if they're just brought into a labor camp, and then they're brought into a place where they just suffer, and all they learn is gang politics and have no training and no ability to function in the outside world. Well, you can't keep them up. You can't keep them locked forever, right? You can't keep them for life. This isn't going to be exile forever. They're going to come back in the streets, and you've done nothing. So again, how does that make our community safer? It absolutely does not. You have to do something there where there's actually some sort of training and education with that. But then also at the same time too, we talk about indentured servitude. That comes from the fact that, again, these companies can basically exploit them for their labor. And how does that help out working class people? Again, like a company has the option between prisoner A or citizen B. Citizen B actually has rights, has a right to a union, has a right to, actually make money. They're never going to go that direction because their greed is going to go, well, the prisoner's cheaper, so we're just going to keep it that way. So we have to eliminate that. Anyone who's in a prison work program should be paid minimum wage. So it dispels the idea that, again, prisoner labor is cheap and easy, and we can just use it any time. So we have to make sure that's out of the equation. And again, having prisons that are just, factories for producing, human animals, that is not appropriate, because again, they're going to come back in the street and all they know is, who owns the keys, who's the gang leader, I don't have any other way to go in life. I can basically just go steal cars again because no one's going to hire me. I don't have any skills. I don't have any ability to live. And again, our communities just have, people after a certain time period who just flood back and just do what they were doing before with no option to go another direction. Now, some people need to be buried under the jail, right? Again, sex offenders, child molesters, murderers, done. You're not coming back. But again, anyone else, again, if it's just like, I was a stupid kid and I stole 2 cars and I'm going to do 5 years, and then they have no chance of future employment and they have no skills. I think there's a path for redemption. And again, other countries don't have this issue because, again, they're not this, again, wrapped into some kind of vengeful mood and, just again, screw them, whatever with these people. We need to get off of that. We need to be smart about this. We need to be really just calculating and a little bit cold about it. Yes, certain people should not come back, but certain people, okay, we'll give them training, get them out. And then also, again, companies cannot just, just use them for just slave labor, because that's what they do all over the place. And that hurts working people, because those companies that could invest in communities, all they're just doing is, getting subsidized by the state with cheap labor. So forget it. Any other questions from the floor? Going once, going twice, sold. All right. So going into the planks that we came up with for our governor candidate. Now, the first one is that we're going to establish a California permanent fund. Now, you might have heard of the Alaska Permanent Fund. This is going to be basically the same thing. It's going to be modeled after Alaska. Basically, what we're going to do is that we're going to have a system where we do have a universal basic income for Californians and residents here. Again, you're going to pull the money from the major resources that are utilized in the state, for example, mineral wealth, and then also dividends from AI. Again, this is not a radical idea, by the way. This is something that Pete Buttigieg, former Secretary of Transportation, actually came up with as well. You take those dividends from the minerals, again, from the AI use, you pour that back into the citizens of California. And again, it's not a radical idea, because if a red state like Alaska could come up with something like that, I'm pretty sure a blue state like California can. So that'd be one. Point 2, launch a national endowment of the arts for the California Republic. Now, we do use the term national endowment, which again sounds like, again, it's just, pure subsidies for, again, artists. But what I want to do is actually make sure that it's a sovereign wealth fund. You have the state as a senior partner. You have the independent artist, who could be a writer, graphic designer, movie maker, whatever, not one of the big production companies, because they got plenty of, subsidies and tax, rights and all this kind of other kind of aid. I'm talking about the independent artists. You put actually the money out there so that the state is a senior partner. They invest in these people make their art, and sometimes you're going to get some jackpots. And when those jackpots come back in, just like any kind of investment fund, you could utilize that money towards literally anything else. You could use it for example, infrastructure, schools, roads, bridges, again, anything that we need to improve California life. We can actually do that with this national endowment fund. And, if you think about the intellectual property, if the state was a senior partner in, say, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or again, Star Wars, or again, like, in the BBC, for example, like Doctor Who, once you have all those things, I mean, that money starts flowing back to us in major ways. We have major returns. Again, BBC does this. And also, again, it kind of is a goofy example, but one of my favorite shows, Trailer Park Boys, that was produced, the senior partner is the province of Nova Scotia in Canada. And that has made them a lot of money too. So again, we have to utilize our resources being like the creative capital of America. We should be supporting these people so they can actually work on their art and we get a cut back. I think it's a very fair system. So again, I mean, how many good artists or how many good actors or how many good people with just great ideas or, great writers have been just wasting away? I mean, imagine if Charles Bukowski was always stuck in the post office. I mean, that we'd just be losing so much cultural wealth, and I think it's just totally inappropriate to do that, and that's why we need to have this endowment fund.
I want to correct one thing you said. You said we're the creative capital of the country. We're the creative capital of the world.
I will not disagree. I will 100% agree with that too. The next point, we need to have a new state California Constitutional Convention. We need to hold a statewide constitutional convention to modernize how California governs. Our current system is pretty old. We've had 2 constitutions in the state, so it's not like there's some kind of weird idea to have another constitution. What we have right now is a system that does not allow voices for third parties. We also have a system that's not really appropriate for California. California, even before independence, has to be considered a nation state, right? We're 40 million people. So again, we're about equal in size to Canada. We're also, more or less, the economy is as big as Germany. And we're not operating like it at all. We need to have a federalized system inside California. We need to make sure that, again, like the localities have control over their own ability to govern. Granted, there needs to be floors. You can't have a region turn to an economic wasteland because it was taken over by conservatives. You can't have another area turn into a California, Alabama. But we need to have the regions strengthened so they can actually control things and not just 80 assemblymen and 60 state senators in Sacramento trying to make the rules for everyone. That is one of the things that we need to do. We need to have that constitutional convention called. We need to revamp the entire structure of government. We also need to make sure that besides, getting a voice of third parties, besides localization, we need to also have the ability for public financing of elections. There's a very interesting book called The 2% Solution. I forget the author's name always. You can look it up. But he had a very great idea about public financing. Public financing gets a little bit of a bad rep because it feels like the government is choosing who's appropriate for public financing, right? Government's kind of picking like, oh, these are legitimate people, and if you're not part of that, you're not part of the legitimate discourse. If you have a system where you create a fund of public finances for elections, and you give every voter a debit card, and they can basically divide up the dollars that they're allotted at their debit card, they can actually finance campaigns through that method. So again, there's no more airdrops of Elon Musk money or anything like that. There's no more corporate financing of elections. There'll just be people with a debit card with a set amount going, you know what, that's an interesting idea. I'm going to send that person $20. That's a great organization. I'm going to send them 50. Until they hit a limit, maybe it's $100 per card, 150, that detail would have to be worked out. But that's a way to clean up our elections right off the bat. But that also, however, kind of presents a question because, yes, we could do that. We could set up a public financing system that would help out a lot. But guess what? If we're still stuck with America, we can't eliminate corporate financing. Again, the Supreme Court will never, ever let that drop. So again, until we really get independent, you're never going to have true public financing, but at least we can get on the road to something better than we have right now.
On top of that, having the convention also gives us an opportunity to basically revamp everything, to strengthen civil rights, to strengthen voting rights, to strengthen women's rights, to strengthen minority rights. I mean, across the board, it needs to be done, and it's an opportunity to enshrine that in the new system.
Absolutely. The next one would be, again, a way to basically declare independence as much as we can at the moment from Wall Street, reopen the Pacific Stock Exchange in San Francisco. The stock exchange, you can look up, it existed from 1956 to 2006. We can have a stock exchange here. We can actually have it where companies can actually have a safe harbor for their capital. without the machinations of Wall Street, because right now, Wall Street is out of control. We know that there's manipulation. We know there's weird things going on. No one trusts that market completely. And that's actually to the detriment of a growing economy. If we have that stock exchange opened in San Francisco, we can have a different world. And also, we would start with California companies, but you do know that, again, other countries would probably want to be part of that exchange because they don't trust Wall Street either, but they don't really have anywhere else to go to. We can move the center of power away from New York and Wall Street with that. So that's another campaign plank. And then the final one, too, or actually two more really quick, but they're both, very easy to understand. Again, we need to have universal health care in California. Again, the big, beautiful bill has blown up a lot of things. I mean, we're talking about people losing their health care left and right. We're talking about places losing hospitals, not just healthcare insurance, total hospitals. Again, we're having rural areas that are completely going to get knocked out of the park because of what just happened with Trump. We need to make that happen now. Now, Democrats actually did do this as a party in the legislature. They did pass universal health care. It's only because a certain Gavin Newsom shot it down. Now, again, I have mixed feelings about that because Newsom did say, again, it costs a hell of a lot. We couldn't afford it. But that's because we're sending $80 billion to the rest of the United States. That's the reason why we can't afford it. And again, we need to have some kind of financing system in place. Also, I think that this would be part of the Constitutional Convention as well, because healthcare is a human right, and that should be part of the state constitution from the get-go. And Ashley, I just want to toss it to you really quick. You can speak about the devastation that's happening in rural hospitals right now.
Oh man, where do I begin? So this is Inyo County, and I'm sure this is probably happening all over California, but I'm only privy to what's happening here. But the collapse of Medicaid funding is cutting. We have two hospitals, two emergency rooms in Inyo County. That's it. 18,000 people, 7 million visitors a year. So they also serve the people visiting us. It's probably a lot less this year because Europeans and Canadians aren't here, and really a lot of people aren't here. But this recent bill is cutting above 50% of our local hospitals' funding, like right out the gate. They're losing over 50% of their funding. So cuts are imminent, and they're really looking at the possibility that they'll have to shutter and close the hospital. Now, for a rural area, and a lot of these hospitals are not new. They've been around for a long time. They're kind of grandfathered in. For a hospital to close, it's very unlikely that it will ever reopen. They don't meet building codes. They don't, there's a lot of things that they let slide because a facility's been in operation for a long time. And also it changes the local workforce. As soon as those good jobs go away, those people have to leave if they work in healthcare, and they're very unlikely to move back, especially considering that even if you fund the hospital, our wages are not competitive anyway. Right? They can't be. So it's very hard to even get people to come here. And then when they do, there's no housing. And a lot of communities are going to experience this type of fallout. And it's a domino effect, because once you take down the local emergency room, you're also taking down the local EMS service, which is my fire department, right? So that is a huge piece of our funding that we no longer have, because we're just calling in helicopters to fly out to another trauma center. And in doing that, the funding goes to them, not to us. So you're talking about the potential of collapse of EMS services statewide, and it's going to be a major issue.
Again, that's why we have to make sure that's part of the plank. Again, it has to happen no matter what. Again, Democrats did have that plan. Newsom shot it down. But again, I think that Newsom, I shouldn't have so much mixed feelings. It's more that Newsom, one, didn't care too much, and two, also Newsom didn't have the imagination to think of a solution to actually make that work. So again, we need to have the imagination to make that happen. The last part is that we should emulate what's going around the New York legislature, which is called the Recourse Act. Basically taking our money that we send to the federal government, take it back. Again, we spend about 80 billion, give or take, giving to the federal government. That's to subsidize red states that hate us. It's to subsidize, again, their basket case economies. Again, they're basically, lack of a better term, welfare queen states. They take a lot of our money. They don't actually produce anything. Why are we doing that? We need to take care of our own household. We have wildfires, we have homeless, we have, again, a looming healthcare crisis. That needs to come back. And also, too, if we do that, that is basically the start of secession, guys. I know it's the S word. It seems like, oh, yeah, that is de facto secession. If we take that money back, we're not giving it back to the central government. We're just a union on paper. So maybe we should just get over it and leave. So that is, again, our entire platform. Let me open up questions to the floor. If anyone had any kind of, comments, concerns about the platform that we just expressed, and let's kind of just open up from there, okay?
And on a lot of the platform that Sean just kind of gave an overview of, it does actually hit on a lot of different subjects that aren't like immediately apparent, as everything is all interconnected. So it gives us a chance to talk about a broad range of our ideas, which are different. And these are the types of things you're not going to hear from Democrats. They're going to stick to the normal game plan. I'm assuming they're going to stick to the talk about these federal intrusions, and they're gonna stick to that kind of narrative, similar to what Gavin Newsom is doing for his presidential run. And I'm assuming that that's going to be kind of the narrative that they will stick to the most. But as in a lot of issues, they're not actually going to propose anything that will actually fix the issue so that they can run on it, right? And you can see that illustrated in what Gavin Newsom just did. There's I think Sean, he put out, I don't know if you've all read it, but he did put out last month a kind of a guide for what Newsom could do right now to stop these illegal ICE raids and these this federalization of our National Guard. And he did none of them. He talked about it, but he didn't do any of those steps, right? And I mean, that we've all become accustomed to that in American politics, of the rhetoric but no action. But there are some things that are off the table for Democrats that they're not going to talk about. And sticking with new ideas, creative solutions, progressive solutions, and focused on the future of California and building it up, at the very least, can change the conversation of this election. We are running against heavy hitters. I know that one of the questions expressed some concern about that, and absolutely, I mean, this is going to be an A-list of a who's who for the DNC, but they're not going to be talking about what we're talking about. And hopefully some of that will get infused into their conversation, and they'll have to start answering questions about that.
I mean, it's again, like Democrats, again, you have, again, Californians have been given a really awful choice. They've been given the choice between basically a Chicago-style city hall throughout the entire state versus brown shirts. Now, of course, Californians are rational enough and smart enough to go, well, I'd rather take the corrupt over the fascistic, right? And they kind of just keep doing that because they really don't have any pushback. There's no opposition to them. We are the opposition. We do present ideas that actually are, again, increasingly popular throughout the entire state. I mean, most of the stuff I've talked about, I don't think it's really wildly out of pocket. This is not like some kind of pie in the sky, like, revolutionary program. I mean, it's revolutionary in the sense that, we do desire independence, but it's not revolutionary in the fact of like anything that is wildly different from Western, European democracies or anything like that. Most of these people in the Democratic Party are careerists, and they want to maintain that hold. They're not really, I mean, for my work, again, I work as a private investigator. I drive up and down the state. I travel down roads that are, completely falling apart. I drive by almost encampments, all the time. I travel throughout the entire state and see every Democratic Party failure constantly. And they have all the mechanisms of power. They have all the cabinet offices. They have, again, the senators from, the representatives of the Fed. They have, again, the entire assembly supermajority. I mean, like, there's like two wackos in, like, Sacramento screaming from the Republican side. The Democrats overwhelm them completely. There's not going to be any kind of true contest between a Democrat and Republican anymore, especially, again, with what's happening right now. So we need to provide ourselves as the opposition to this Democratic machine, which is, again, what happens to any country or any place that has just one party dominance, they're going to grow corrupt. They will not have any kind of like need to improve things, because why? You're just going to win election after election. There's absolutely no point. Again, you might have some uprisings inside the party, but those are always going to be outliers. They're never really going to push through. I mean, again, look at the national stage, AOC, Bernie Sanders, have they affected policy, the Democrats? Not really. So what makes you think that a state senator or, assembly person or mayor can really push the Democratic parties to actually do something here in California? Is this not going to happen?
They couldn't even pass to raise the legal age for marriage to 18. California still is just as bad as Alabama when it comes to child marriage, which is absurd. Yes, it's absurd. It's like,
this is your super liberal, majorities that could do anything. Yeah, no, again, they don't even get on top of that. I mean, also too, I mean, it is a huge scandal that, they poured money into, again, efforts to help the unhoused. Have we seen anything come through? I mean, there's a lot of money that got poured through these programs. Have you seen any kind of effect? I haven't seen it in Los Angeles. I haven't seen it in Long Beach. So again, we're always running into, there is grift and corruption because they do not have opposition. They know they'll always win because Californians are not going to vote for a brown shirt. So again, we have to be that opposition to actually push them to actually do something, and more than push them, actually start winning some things so that we can actually enact policy that I think most Democratic voters actually want. I mean, like, our values between us and the Democrats is in, a couple of ways, very revolutionary, obviously, because we want to have independence, but also we're just trying to enact the Democratic platform that they've been talking about. I mean, this goes back to the Newsom problem. Newsom talks, great rhetoric, wow, again, he really got some zingers out there. Is he doing anything else? Not really. I mean, was he there again? Karen Bass, I don't like at all. I think that she's been a very poor mayor for multiple reasons, but at least she got out to the park and actually confronted, federal officers. So again, she gets points in my book for actually doing that. Newsom, again, when this was all happening, where was he? South Carolina. And then also getting a nice little 6 hour from what's his name? Sean Reynolds, a podcaster. Who, again, if you don't know who that is, there's a good reason. He's a right-wing nut. You're probably not interested in listening to him. But Newsom would rather spend time on that kind of podcast because he's preparing the groundwork, But we don't have that much time. I mean, think about, for example, how much nonsense and craziness we've had between here and January. I mean, again, does it not feel like, again, it's been lifetimes already? Does it not feel that this is a changed world? Does it not feel that something ugly is around the horizon? I mean, we are being pressured by so much right now, and it's only been 7 months. Imagine what it would be in 2028 when Newsom wants to really fix things. I mean, again, if we let Newsom take his sweet time, well, we really don't have a country. I mean, the MAGA has already dissolved the bonds of union. So again, they've seceded from rationality a long time ago. And I think that we need to go in the other direction and get away from these people. And unless we really make sure this can happen, I think that we are under direct threat. I mean, again, we have loved ones and people who are being faced with the fact that there's a government gangs hunting them down. That is the reality right now. We have, again, no trust in anything that is happening out of DC. We have this, this country committed moral suicide twice for electing Trump. So, it is a zombie that is just marching along, and we're supposed to take orders from it. And I think we just need to get done with that. We need to get out of this crap. And the only way to do it is independence. If we can't do that, for example, if we have a chief executive that does things, actually makes things happen for Californians, and then also chief executive is really going to go toe-to-toe with the federal government. And I'm not talking, this is not 1860 politics or anything like that. We need to get this out of our head. The history of countries dissolving and countries seceding from each other, that comes from the 20th century, not the 19th century. The USSR, which had massive secret police, massive military, held by force and fear. There wasn't really this bloody civil war or anything like that. Same thing with Czechoslovakia. They split peacefully. Even a unique example, Singapore was peacefully ejected from Malaysia. So again, we can do this. Again, this has happened all over the world. Again, I don't believe in anything like American exceptionalism whatsoever. Owen, I'm sorry, I was going off, but please.
Hey, sorry, so you asked the questions earlier. I joined late and I think I may have missed some stuff, but I really like what I'm hearing. I really like the framing of this, that like it's it's not really enough just to kind of bash Trump and all the fascist stuff. It's also important to realize that a big part of why we got to this state we're in now is because the Democrats have been so ineffective, and we need people who are going to be more effective at like capturing the public imagination with like good policy directions. What I'm really interested in is like, what are the little steps that we could take that would that we think a lot of voters could agree on, that would move us toward the direction of independence, but maybe wouldn't trigger that sort of knee-jerk reaction that a lot of people seem to have, that just secession is a dumb idea, and they get turned off by that if they think that's where it's headed. Like, are there little things we could achieve?
I think so, because like, for example, like, the platform that I was talking about, this is a platform that is for before independence, right? This is not something like, again, like, what we would do after, Independence Day. So if we show ourselves as a party of good governance that actually enacts things that, again, majority of voters in California are Democrat, if we actually enact a lot of what Democrats had wanted for years, we already build up trust. We also would build up trust in a lot of ways with, again, the state constitutional convention, because if we call that and we make sure that third parties, like, again, Greens, Libertarians, Socialists, and ourselves have more ability to have a voice in government. Again, a lot of people go, okay, CNP is actually the party for expanded democracy. And also, again, a really chief point too is that the state constitutional convention, by that being called, we would have the regions of California become states within the state, right? We basically develop a federalist system before even independence. And when people feel that they're empowered and they can actually make decisions for their own communities that actually make sense, then people will start trusting us even more with, again, full-blown independence, because they'll already see the blueprint of what we want, which is basically, we want to operate like any other federalized society across the world. I mean, like, America's not the only one that has that kind of a system. Canada has it with the provinces. The Germans have it with their own, what they call the Landers, or they're basically their states, right? Again, so we start doing these checkpoints and actually hitting that and achieving that, then people go, yeah, what's the point of actually the union anymore? Because,
So like we can kind of create better democracy within California.
right. If we expand up a democracy, if we make sure that, again, healthcare is not hanging over everyone's head like an anvil. If we can actually make sure, again, rural hospitals, for example, like, people write off way too many counties as being like red counties, right? Because, they went for Trump or whatever. And to be honest, again, most of those counties are purplish or just, full of the politically agnostic. They just don't have a horse in the race, because it's like, they're not fascist, but they don't really like people in Sacramento either telling them what to do. And if you actually provide, services, like, again, making sure that they have a medical infrastructure, if you actually make sure that, hey, we're not going to have to deal with dumb bureaucracy coming out of Sacramento, we can actually handle things ourselves like a state, because, again, LA County is 16 million people, right? I mean, like, we're bigger than most states. So why are we not just, involving more democracy so people actually feel like they're heard? I think that a lot of times if people are so upset with the what's happening in Sacramento and current state governments, because they're just not being heard. I mean, and how could they? Again, there's only about 80 assembly people, 60 state senators. LA County's board of supervisors is a whopping 5 for 16 million. That is an oligarchy. That is not democratic in the slightest. There's no assembly there whatsoever. I think that people will start seeing the investment, and that will return to, okay, so we did all this, we made all this happen. Then why are we still having these weird things come out of DC? Because there's always going to be weird things coming out of DC, and there's going to be ugly things coming out of DC. So, and again, the bonds of trust between us and the central government have been irrevocably broken. It's just that we have to wake up to that fact. But again, Californians are rational, generous, good people for the most part. And I think that by being rational, it's like, they've heard a lot of rhetoric already. They've heard a lot of this talk over and over and over again, right? So again, like, you have to prove it by governance. And again, I think that by having a governor actually in office, and again, more and more people coming out for local office, they'll start to see that, because again, this is a legitimate option. And once they see the good governance come through, they're going to be like, okay, well then this is it. You know, it's a little transactional, but that's how people operate.
You know, Owen, on that point, and like with what Sean's talking about too, I'm reminded that like with the division that we have in the US right now, and on a much more micro scale within California itself, what he's saying about rural areas, as a person that's lived in rural areas for most of my life, it's absolutely right. They've just been abandoned by both parties. It's just Republicans say the right thing.
Right.
And even the independents who tend to in these type of rural areas tend to vote Republican, it's really just a fuck you vote to Sacramento, right? And a little bit goes a long way. So even on the local scale, for like a local candidate for CNP who gets into office and starts just putting their money where their mouth is and starts working for their constituents, even small gestures go a long way. Even the fact that like a candidate for like state senate would come here to speak to people, find out our issues, and then make that a part of their platform, or at least a priority, even that would be a big change from what's happening now. So I think that California unity is a really big component of what we're talking about, and establishing a California identity, which we already have, but kind of weaving that into a tapestry that really can stand in front of our party flag and say that we're the party that represents a unified California. Let's let Democrats and Republicans and so-called independents, let's let them do whatever they do. But what we do is serve communities in California, period. You know what I mean? And I think that is going to be a very powerful shift in how government works in California, how parties work in California. There shouldn't be a party line, and that's where we stick. Like we stay on that path, no matter what, no matter who gets trampled. Party lines, that is already a dead thing. It's playing out. We're watching the death throes of these old party lines just dying, and unfortunately for Democrats in this state, they have ignored every border county and just said, oh, these are all just red counties. And that is not the case. It is not the case. We still have the same cultural values. It's just these counties have been ignored, just like they ignored the Rust Belt and the other parts of the U.S. in general. So I think that's a huge part of the conversation.
On a personal level, I got family members who we've kind of lost to right-wing politics because those are the only people that were reaching out to them, right? Not surprising that somebody gets pulled into that cinematic universe when there's nothing else being offered to them.
Exactly. That's
Yeah, it's so true. Again, it's just like, it's just a lack of alternatives. And again, kind of just, again, this is a little addendum to like Ash's point, people, again, especially like on the left, kind of have this like, a little bit knee-jerk reaction when it comes to certain California counties, for example, right? But like San Bernardino, again, did vote for Biden in 2020. Inyo County did the same thing too. Now, I think they flipped back, but again, it wasn't by much margin. So again, these are not like areas you can just write off as like, oh, it's so deeply red. I mean, I'm a stone's throw away in Long Beach from Seal Beach, and that's Orange County. And that used to be, we had the joke that it was the Orange Curtain, right? Again, it was this ultra conservative and never changing. Well, no, they've had Democrats there now. Again, it's like they're, holed up in a few bunkers, mostly again, behind the Beach City Council, but it's not the same anymore. And people are looking for good alternatives. And again, they've opened their minds, I think, a lot. So, well, it's about 6:56, guys. I just want to bring up a couple things really quick. First off, we do have Brennan Duck, who is our NorCal chapter coordinator, set up a GoFundMe. This is a interesting one that I hope that everyone will take a look at. It is basically trying to register voters, or actually put out postcards to help register voters for CNP in Inyo County. Inyo County, again, how many voters are in Inyo County, Ash?
Oh, I didn't check for recently. I don't know if
it's like 1,800 or something like. It's not that much.
Oh, no, it's more than that. It's
Okay.
somewhere I think it's around 6,000 total, but
Okay.
1800, I believe that's for 5th district that you're.
Okay, okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So anyway, we're trying to raise money to actually register voters on Inyo County. Again, that'll be the first stop for again our again, whoever the governor's candidate would be. Again, that would be basically trying to start there to try to build up support in a kind of unusual area that again most people don't campaign on, and also would focus on just the general idea of local issues and local problems. The other one too is that we are building up a campaign staff and opening up for positions here. I'll put this into the chat. If you would like to send a resume, we've gotten a few already. Just send it directly to my account, or actually the secretary's account at secretary@californianational.party. So if you have interest with helping out, please just send a resume and that'd be fantastic. But that's pretty much it. So again, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate the town halls. Also, again, we're going to do another one, of course, and again, in a couple of weeks or so. We'll try to open up to more people, but thank you again for registering and sending your questions. And that's pretty well about it. Okay.
Yep.
So Arya, can you sign us off?
Thanks, everybody.